welcome to our celebration this week Father Jordan. Father Jordan is a Dominican priest. He's a parish priest from another part of our country, and he is here on vacation, and I'm not going to tell you where he is. Because he's enjoying his rest and relaxation, and we're so glad that he is joining us today. The readings today, particularly the first reading and the Gospel, give us a wonderful sense of the importance of the commandments and even the practices of the faith in our life. In the first reading it says that we can rejoice that God has given us such wonderful commandments to guide us in our lives, to provide us with the assistance that we need to know what is right and what is good. Jesus in the Gospel says that we have religious practices that can be helpful to us, but as Jesus points out, whether it be the commandments or the practices of our faith, it presumes that we are a people who are able to use the wisdom that God has given us and to practice the virtues that God has set before us in properly understanding how to follow the commandments and how to follow the practices of our faith. To find out what is the most important things for us to do. What are the most important prescriptions of God that we should follow in this particular instance. So wisdom and a sense of virtue and dedication, particularly to the kind of life that Christ revealed when he was here among us through his words and through his example. All of these are very important. And as I was reading over these scriptures and reflecting upon them during the week, I thought back to something that I had seen a while ago, and I actually went back and hunted it down again. It was a little conference. I don't even know whether you'd call it a conference. They're called TED conferences. I don't know if any of you have ever seen any of them. They're on the internet. You can access them through your computers. And the TED conferences invite people who have big ideas and who have worthy ideas to come forth and share them with people. So they call their site Ideas Worth Spreading. And so they produce, in the form of these little YouTube videos, these little conferences or these little talks that only take about 15 or 20 minutes. I think of them as kind of like little secular homilies. Except they have one advantage: you can turn them off. You get to turn me off, but it's not physically. But I thought of one that I had seen a while back. It was a little talk, lasted about 20 minutes, by someone named Barry Schwartz. And Barry Schwartz is a psychologist who has written books and gives a lot of conferences of this kind. And the particular one that he gave, the title of this one was Wisdom in Daily Life. And as I say, I hunted it down because I was impressed by it the first time I heard it. And he says that what we really need in daily life is wisdom. Now, he's not talking from a religious perspective. He's talking from a human perspective. And he says we know that we need wisdom. He says wisdom and a sense of virtue provides us not only with moral will, the desire to do what is good, but he also says it also provides us with moral skill to know how to accomplish what we know to be virtuous. So we have to not only desire to do what is right and what is good, but we have to also have the skills in order to be able to accomplish that, to actually do it. And I thought that was an interesting point that he had to make. Well, anyway, at the beginning of his talk, this little tiny 20-minute talk, he started off for the audience that he was speaking to by having on the screen that was behind him, scrolling through, a list of the job requirements. Did you? I don't know if you've ever had one of these You know, you have a job description very often nowadays when you do some work. These are the things that they expect you to do. Well, this was a job description from a hospital, and it was the job description of janitors, or the janitorial staff, in a large hospital. And a team of psychologists went in there to study the job description of various people in the hospital, but then to talk to the individuals who actually do the work to find out how they describe what they're doing. And they found out something very interesting. Because as you went through the list of all the things that were being scrolled on the screen behind Mr. Schwartz as he was giving this talk, he said, you'll notice one thing. He said, notice that the job description for janitors is clean the floor this number of times, do it at this time of day, then vacuum the carpets, wash the windows, clear off the desks. It was all of these sorts of things, and there must have been at least 50 things, because the list kept scrolling on and on and on. Well, he said the psychologists that went into the hospital discovered something. When they went through the list of the job description, the formal job description, not one of the little pieces of that job, not one of them mentioned people. They were all about things. Wash the floor, vacuum the carpets, wash the windows, blah, blah, blah. Okay? All about things, nothing about people. But then they went to speak to the people who were actually doing the job. And one of the things that they discovered was that a majority of the people they talked to, who were the janitors, the men and women who did the work, in describing what they do, they talked about people. They said, in order to make the place healthy and safe, we do this. In order to assist the medical staff, we do this. They talked about their work almost as if it was a ministry, or at least a service to other people. And they said, that gave us a real insight into, there was nothing wrong with the list of tasks that they had to do. But it was missing something. It was missing that human element. And in the course of talking about the work that these janitors were doing, they came up with some beautiful little stories. They said, for example, one of the janitors that they talked to said, in my job description it says, you wash the floor on this particular level, this particular area of the hospital, at this particular time of day every afternoon, okay? He said, I really can't do it at that time. He said, I decided I would do it later, even though the job description says do it right now. And he said, and the reason that I do that is because there are 2 or 3 older people on that floor, and that's the time that they walk up and down the corridor to get some exercise. So you see what was happening? That someone who was attuned to people knew what the law was, but they also knew that the more important thing at this moment, the wise and virtuous thing to do, is to respect the needs of these people, especially when you can do that job at a later time. They came up with similar instances. For example, there's a woman, her janitorial task at a particular time of day is to clean the visitor's lounge. Clean it, vacuum the carpet, dust everything, make sure the washrooms are clean and that sort of thing. But she said, right now in the hospital, we have a family from away, and they're coming to visit a desperately ill patient, and they cannot stay in a hotel or anything. So they stay morning, noon, and night in that room. They're all crammed in that little room, and that's where they stay, and they try to sleep. They don't sleep very well at night, so very often they'll be snoozing during the day. And she said, if I notice that they're snoozing, I put off the work that I'm supposed to do because of this job description. And I do it at a time when I'm not going to disturb this family because of their needs. And they collected a number of these beautiful little anecdotes to show that it takes real wisdom, and it takes a kind of a sense of moral value, the value of people. And it says we don't necessarily want to change our job description. We just want to let people know that sometimes you have to depart from the letter of the law in order to get the spirit of it as the higher virtue in practicing. And as I was listening to this talk, I said, now I know why I connected it, because isn't that exactly what Jesus was saying in the gospel? Jesus was not condemning the little practices of the faith that were going on. But Jesus came to give us a sense of what is the virtue, what are the qualities that God is looking for when in wisdom and with a sense of dedication to God's deeper purpose, someone interprets what's the best thing to do in terms of their, whether it be the commandments or the religious practices of the day. To understand that God has called us to live wisely in our daily lives and to live virtuously. And a great example of this is Jesus himself. Jesus is saying to the scribes and the Pharisees, look, it's not that your little practices are bad. It's that you've missed the boat. You have forgotten that there are some more important things that God has called us to. And we always have to judge what we do here and now on the basis of that. And what a beautiful teaching that is. I think that Barry Schwartz, he talks about the virtue that a wise person brings to whatever task they do as they're trying to fulfill whatever their job description is, whether it's a formal one working for a big institution or whether it's just to fulfill your work at home. He says that he divides it into three categories. He says we have to do it with kindness, with care, and with empathy towards the people that we're with and the people who are going to be involved in what it is that we're doing. And I thought those three values were really beautiful. Kindness, care, empathy. And there certainly are three that we see in Christ. Barry Schwartz has come to this idea using human knowledge, using human wisdom, and that's a wonderful thing. When Christ tells it to us, though, he comes to us with something special that's even beyond human wisdom. Because when Christ tells us that living a wisely and a virtuous life in the presence of God as we live out the life that God has given us, that when we do it with love, the love that Christ showed, when that becomes our primary motivating factor, we are not only acting wisely from a human point of view, we are acting with an insight that Christ has given to us about what God expects of us, about the way in which God created us as human beings, and the way in which God created us to act as we live in his presence. It's not that the commandments, it's not that the religious practices are not important. Those who are wise, those who are people with a heart, those who live according to the virtue of love, understand that all of them have to be put into practice by people who have the same priorities in their heart as were the priorities of Christ the Lord.